Hi, my name is Dash Curran, and welcome to my presentation on the Stanley Parable, where I will be focusing on narrative, agency, and emergence. My argument is the following. The Stanley Parable, through its intricate weave of narrative, agency, and emergence, serves not just as an interactive experience, but as a commentary on human behavior, unseen forces, and the tension between conformity and rebellion. So first off, narrative. Defined as a storyline that players experience and often influence through gameplay. As we traditionally understand, a narrative is a sequence of events detailing a story from start to finish across a linear path. The narrative in the Stanley Parable, however, is different. Initially, upon entering the game, you might be confused by this statement, as the narrator's voiceover seems to reflect a traditional linear narrative. The explicit rules are voiced by the narrator, shown in the screenshot on the left, where he declares, when Stanley came to a set of two open doors, he entered a door on his left. This clear directive is supposed to establish the narrator as a guide to the gameplay. Players typically test boundaries when playing games, though, and if you go through the door on the right, you will find that it does not lead to a game over screen, but rather a new path and subsequent narration. This find shows that the guide is not always to be followed when exploring this game. As you delve deeper, you encounter a number of branching storylines with different outcomes. When straying from his directions, the narrator often tries to get Stanley back on track by offering a snarky or sarcastic comment, like the screenshot on the right, which reads, although this passageway has the word escape written on it, the truth was at the end of this hall. Stanley would meet his violent death. This is a subtle commentary on the real world. We are presented with limitless opportunities daily, but often our actions are subtly influenced by unseen forces such as societal expectations, family pressures, and personal fears. In this context, the narrator is the unseen force potentially influencing Stanley's actions. Agency. Agency is often understood as the power individuals have to act autonomously, making decisions based on their desires. In gaming, this translates to the choices players make that can impact the game's narrative or world. The Stanley Parable overthrows this concept, presenting a unique take on player agency. Consider the screenshot on the left below. Stanley reaches two diverging paths, one leading to the mind control facility, and the other marked escape. You might feel a sense of agency here while playing. Do you go into the facility and face what's been controlling Stanley this whole time? Or do you seek an escape from the confines of the story? Either way, your choice feels impactful. However, as the narrative unfolds, it becomes clear that even these seemingly major decisions have been anticipated. Each choice leads to a different branch of the story, but all have been pre-written, and the narrator always has a response ready. Suddenly, what felt like a moment of important decision-making is revealed to be another predetermined layer of the narrative. In his paper, Paradox and Pedagogy in the Stanley Parable, Antonin Xarian sums this up when he writes, despite the chooser's best efforts, their behavior is ultimately defined by the parameters given by the choice. This realization is profound and comments on pieces of our own lives. How many choices are we genuinely in control of? And how many are reactions to an outside narrative? It shows that our choices can still be limited, even in places where we think we have the most control, like in a video game. This game mechanic becomes a metaphor for real life and touches on the philosophical concept of free will. Are we truly free in our decisions? Or are our lives, to some extent, scripted by factors beyond our control, like Stanley's is? Emergence. Emergence in gaming refers to complex situations or patterns arising from simple interactions. In the Stanley Parable, this concept is touched upon heavily. At the game's core, the players' interactions are straightforward. They can either obey or defy the narrator. Yet, from this choice, an array of outcomes emerges, making every playthrough unique. Take the instance where Stanley finds himself in a seemingly insignificant broom closet, pictured below on the left. The narrator tells him there is nothing special about the broom closet, yet the game's design encourages curiosity. As you linger longer in the closet, the narrator offers rude but humorous lines regarding Stanley, showing that there may be reason to stay. Remaining there leads to a sequence of events the player might not have anticipated before, an emergent storyline that was unexpected. The brilliance of Emergence within the Stanley Parable lies in its ability to showcase itself as a gaming mechanic and reflect human nature. As in the real world, where countless small decisions lead to unforeseen consequences, the game illustrates how following a prescribed path and seeking our own way can lead to vastly different outcomes. It mirrors the unpredictability of life, where seemingly insignificant choices can set off a chain reaction of events. Furthermore, this emergent gameplay becomes a commentary on societal structures. The game subtly critiques the societal expectation to conform to a pre-laid path, suggesting that true emergence and individuality come from questioning and rebelling against your root. It prompts the players to reflect. How often do we allow genuine emergence in the real world? In those spontaneous decisions, we often find the most joy and growth. Just as players derive unexpected pleasure from defying the game's narrative and staying in the broom closet, real-life moments of emergence can bring satisfaction. The article, Permitted Rebellion and Anti-Capitalism, Insights from the Stanley Parable by Callum on Medium.com, examines the game's sophisticated storyline, paying close attention to the freedom ending, which is pictured below on the left. This climax, reached exclusively by adhering to the narrator's guidelines, represents the tension between conformity and rebellion. Through this tension, the game reflects real-world dynamics, where utter compliance often leads to expected, seemingly liberating outcomes, while defiance embarks into the unknown. Reaching the freedom ending by following the narrator's voice shows obedience to directions, reflecting a sense of freedom that still falls within the system's rules. The illusion here is that Stanley attains his freedom in the end. By only following the narrator's instructions, he has actually sacrificed most of his autonomy, challenging the player's idea of true freedom and self-rule. The Stanley Parable, through its story structure, questions the often binary view of following rules versus breaking them, urging players to think about what freedom really means. This is the visual representation that I'm using to illustrate my argument and key terms within the context of the Stanley Parable. You might first notice that the entire image is presented within a circular frame. This is done purposefully. Its circular nature depicts the narrative structure within the Stanley Parable. Once you reach any of the multiple endings, the game loops back to the start, where Stanley is again sitting at his office desk. The whole game is a never-ending cycle, akin to the frame. Within the frame are 3 doors, each leading to the same ocean. This part of the image represents player agency within the game and the illusion of choice. Although there appears to be a sense of agency when seeing the 3 distinct doors, this agency dissolves upon realizing that they all lead to the same space. The illusion shown here is touched upon heavily within the Stanley Parable, where all you can really decide to do is obey or defy the narrator, and either way, your choice has been anticipated. Finally, the split between the yellow beach and the blue ocean down the middle portrays emergence. It signifies how close other narrative paths are in the Stanley Parable and how subtle movements can define the story's trajectory and change it completely. Thank you for watching. Here are my sources.